Welcome back to Wildcat Science with Mrs. Haugo. We are on the digestive system, chapter 19, part 3. And as you remember, we were talking about the gallbladder. We're going to talk about the gallbladder, which is a muscular sac located on the inferior surface of the liver. If you look at this picture here, here's our liver, and then there is the gallbladder. It stores bile that was made in the liver, and then the gallbladder will release the bile into the small intestine. And if you remember, the bile helps emulsify or break the fat up into little droplets so it can be digested. And as you remember, fats are not water soluble, and so that's why they need to be emulsified. So fatty diets can lead to gallstones, and often with gallstones, the gallbladder needs to be removed. So you can live without a gallbladder, but it is better to avoid all of that. The final accessory organ we're going to talk about is the pancreas. The pancreas is a long gland located under the stomach, running from the small intestine to the spleen. So as you can see in this picture, it is underneath the stomach, and it is from the small intestine all the way over, and there would be a spleen right here. It produces nearly all of the digestive enzymes in your body. So your pancreas is essential. Anything that gets digested probably was done so by the enzymes that the pancreas made. So the digestive enzymes enter the small intestine via the pancreatic duct, and they are essential. The digestive enzymes are essential for digesting fats, carbohydrates, proteins, and nucleic acids, which, if you remember from biology, are your 4 biological molecules. Your pancreas also produces a lot of sodium bicarbonate to neutralize the acidic chyme coming from your stomach. I would like you to think for a little bit why it needs to do that. Also, your pancreas will produce insulin and glucagon, which helps regulate your blood sugar. So those digestive enzymes coming from the pancreas are responsible for chemical digestion, which is when complex food molecules are broken down into their chemical building blocks. So if you remember, we have 4 biological molecules: your carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. And those are way too big for your cells to use, so they need to be broken down into their building blocks. Each enzyme, which is a protein catalyst, and as you know, a catalyst is something that speeds up a reaction. So each enzyme digests a specific nutrient molecule. So it's like a lock and key system. So like this enzyme will only digest this particular food molecule. So one of the biological molecules, carbohydrates, are digested into simple sugars like glucose, and that is done so by the enzymes amylase, maltase, sucrase, and lactase. This happens in the mouth and in the small intestine. And we do have a lab with the enzyme amylase and starch amylose. So let's say that this was the enzyme amylase and this is your starch amylose. It is going to break the amylose up into smaller sugars. As you can see, if this was amylase, only amylose would fit into this lock and key mechanism, and it gets broken down into smaller pieces. So if you remember from biology, we had a lab with the enzyme lactase, and we were trying to break down lactose. And we did that with the balloons and the test tubes and the yeast, and see what you can remember about that experiment. So another biological molecule, proteins, they are digested into amino acids by enzymes pepsin and trypsin, and this happens in the stomach and also in the small intestine. Another one of your biological molecules are lipids or fats, and they are digested into fatty acids and glycerol by enzymes, a group of enzymes called lipase. And this happens in the small intestine. And our fourth biological molecule are the nucleic acids. And they are digested into their building blocks, the nucleotides, by the group of enzymes called nuclease. And this also happens in the small intestine. So once our chemical building blocks once our biological molecules have been broken down into building blocks, the nutrients must be absorbed by small intestine, by the capillaries. And if you remember from your cardiovascular system, what about capillaries makes them good at absorbing nutrients? Then they're going to go to the liver to be processed and stored, or processed and then released into the tissues to go where you need them. So the nervous system is in control of this, and your endocrine system is in control of the digestive process. And there is some interesting information in your book on pages 441 to 442, 443, and on those tables. Okay, what could possibly go wrong? The digestive system disorders. Let's start with gastroesophageal reflux disease. So the esophageal sphincter allows, right here, it normally does not allow any stomach acid to get into the esophagus, because if you remember, the stomach has a nice layer of a lot of mucus to protect it, and the esophagus does not have as much protection. So if it is not doing its job, then the stomach acid can get into the esophagus, causing pain. If this happens occasionally, that's just normal. That is heartburn. If it happens chronically, that is a disorder. It is GERD, or gastroesophageal reflux disease. What causes it? Overeating can cause this to happen. Eating high-fat meals can cause this to happen. Being obese and having a genetic predisposition are all things that make it more likely to happen. So what can we do if it happens? So avoiding triggers. Some common triggers are drinking alcohol, and obviously that applies as an adult after you're over 21. Don't lie down after eating. That can be a trigger. If obesity is a problem, losing weight, and then otherwise there are medications a person can take. So that stomach acid can really cause problem if it's not contained, and that also happens with peptic ulcers, which is an area of mucous membranes in the stomach. This could also happen in the esophagus or the small intestine, where the tissues are being destroyed and it causes pain. So what causes it? It used to be thought that stress was what caused ulcers, but that is not the major cause of ulcers. The major cause of ulcers is actually a bacterial infection, and this little guy, Helicobacter pylori, is the troublemaker. Also smoking, the overuse of painkillers like Tylenol and aspirin, and drinking can cause ulcers. So what do we do if it happens? So one can take antibiotics to get rid of this little guy. Antacids, we know, would buffer the acid, and so would make that not hurt as much. And lifestyle changes. If it has to do with stress, alcohol, too many painkillers, or smoking, then you would want to make changes to make your ulcers not as bad. Okay, the third and final disorder we're going to talk about is celiac disease. And this is a disease of the of the small intestine. So in celiac disease, a person cannot tolerate the protein gluten. And gluten is a protein found in wheat, barley, and rye. This is a genetic disorder, so a person is born with it or they are born with a genetic predisposition for it. And it is an autoimmune disorder, which means your body is attacking itself. This autoimmune disorder is triggered when a person with celiac eats gluten. So when this happens, when gluten is eaten, there is an inflammatory response that will damage the intestinal villi. So you can look here in the intestines. This is a healthy person's intestines. And then this is someone with celiac disease after eating a lot of gluten over many years. The body, the inflammatory response has attacked the villi, and you can tell that they are no longer going to be as good at absorbing nutrients because there's not nearly as much surface area. And that is the problem with celiac disease. The damaged villi can't absorb the nutrients and people can become malnourished. So normally gluten is something that we all eat and it's just fine, but someone with celiac disease cannot eat gluten and without a lot of repercussions. So what would happen if someone with celiac disease does eat gluten? How do we know if a person has it? Well, after eating gluten, there would be periods of diarrhea, constipation, bloating, and abdominal pain. So basically, it is not pleasant. How would a person know if they have it? It can be diagnosed with a blood test. Treatment. There is no cure for celiac disease, but it can be treated 100% by just never ever eating gluten again. So only the inflammatory response that destroys the villi, that only happens when a person with celiac disease eats gluten. So if they don't eat gluten, then they will have no problems. So what is gluten found in? Bread, pasta, cereal, soy sauce, noodles, crackers, pretzels, cakes, pizza, cookies, brownies, pies, granola, pancakes, waffles, tortillas, anything breaded, anything with croutons or gravy, and many different sauces. So as you can see, this would take a big change in your diet. It is estimated a number of people do have celiac disease. That is 1 in 200 people perhaps. And there are also people who do not have celiac disease but don't eat gluten. That's a personal choice. There is no medical reason for that. Okay, what are some fun facts? How long are your intestines? They are about 25 feet. But if you are a horse, they're about 89 feet long if you stretch them out. Food can dry up and hang out in your large intestines up to 2 days. And you will eat and digest about 50 tons of food. Quiz time! Okay, take a moment and write this down. The green, so write green and then write down your guess. Red and your guess. Pink and your guess. Brown and your guess. Purple and your guess. Green and your guess. Yellow and your guess. Okay, how did you do? The green was the esophagus. Red was the stomach. Pink was the small intestine. Brown was the large intestine. Purple is the liver. Green is the gallbladder. Yellow is the pancreas. Good job. So let's talk about, so we're going to find out what happened to Adam. So chapter 19 notes are done. All right, good job, everyone. Thank you.